Thank you for that very thought-provoking speech. I've never seen so much insight in our national anthem. It's powerful. Our next speaker is Dr. Andrew S. Nevin. Dr. Andrew is a partner, chief economist and financial services advisory leader in PwC Nigeria. He is one of PwC's leading global thinkers, working at the intersection of economic strategy and regulation. Dr. Nevin has almost 30 years of professional experience as an economist, strategy consultant, and private equity investor. In 2011, he was named Strategy Consultant of the Year by the Management Consultants Association in the UK. As financial services advisory leader, Andrew has helped several Nigerian banks solve business challenges relating to strategy, technology, operations, and regulation. He has also helped global companies across various industries evaluate their options for expanding their businesses in Nigeria and in Africa. As chief economist, he has led the writing of PwC Nigeria's white papers, including Looking Beyond Oil, the impact of corruption on the Nigerian economy, in January 2016, which showed that Nigeria's GDP will be over 100 billion larger if it had the same level of corruption as Ghana. He also frequently comments on the Nigerian economy on TV and on print media. Andrew started his career at McKinsey & Co., serving in the Toronto and Paris offices. He holds a PhD in economics from Harvard University, an MA in philosophy and politics from Baylor University, Oxford, and a BSc in computer science and mathematics from the University of Western Ontario, Canada. Today, he's speaking at a platform on Nigeria's need for foreign capital to grow. Let us welcome to the platform Dr. Andrew.
My friends from channels have put this here, so I'm going to have to stay put. First, it's just an absolute honor and delight to be here. Some of the senators invite me. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the speeches ahead of mine. I hope what I have to say is interesting and helpful. But let me start just a couple more words about me. I've been coming to Nigeria for more than 10 years. And a little over 5 years ago, I moved to Nigeria. I live here full time. So I'm paid in Naira. I pay for my own car. I pay for my own housing. I have a mortgage, it's 21%. In fact, I bought property here. So the first speaker was very, very helpful for me personally. But we're all in this together. So, the title of my talk is about the need for foreign investment in Nigeria, and I hope to be able to make that case to you today. But I think even better title for my talk would be just the mathematics of Nigeria's economic and social situation. So I have slides, and I'm going to show you some numbers I think that are very important to everyone in this room, everyone in the country, to all the leaders in business and government, because it presents a set of challenges and opportunities that if we don't succeed, we're all going to rue the Nigeria not reaching its potential. So I want to start with this slide. It's a little small. I'll talk through it on that. So what this slide shows is 30 largest economies in the world. And it ranks them by the growth in population and working age population. That's why there's 2 bars for each country. And on the far right of this graph, you can't read it, but I'll tell you, there's Poland. So Poland has a situation where its population is shrinking, its working age population is shrinking, and that presents unique challenges. In the middle, there's a lot of countries where there's not much growth. I mean, global population growth has come down, so we shouldn't expect much growth. But on the far left, there's 2 bars together for the working age and the total population. What country do you think that is? Someone want to guess? Why did I bring the slide? On the far left is Nigeria. Now the interest, so it is, of the top countries, large countries, is growing the fastest in population terms, fastest in working age population. But if you look carefully at the graph, not only is it growing faster, there is a big gap between Nigeria and the next country, which is Bangladesh. We are growing by far faster than any other large country. Now what are the implications of that? By 2050, Nigeria is projected to be the world's most third populous country. Now if you think about this for a moment, for everyone in this room, for everyone watching, for everyone on this planet, for their entire life, there have only been 3 countries that are the most populous, which are China, India, and the United States. There's only been one change in order, which is when India's population overtook China because of the one-child policy. In your lifetime, this is going to change, and we are going to be the 3rd most populous country. As I said, that comes with great opportunity, but it also comes with great responsibility, and it also has some economic implications that we're going to talk about this morning. Now, I said before that we're growing at almost 3% population growth. We need to grow at least 5%, 6 or 7% would be better, a year to stay ahead of the population growth. If we're only growing 3% a year, we're standing still. Poverty is not declining. If we only grow 2%, we're actually going backwards. If we only grow 4%, we're not making much of a difference. So we need to grow at a minimum of 5%. As I said, but 6 or 7% is better. So what are the implications of that? So this graph, I don't think it came out, well, it's a little difficult, but it actually has 3 lines, and unfortunately the Nigerian line is at the bottom, so I'll step away and show you on the microphone, or this microphone in a minute. But what this shows is the gross investment level of 3 countries. So the top line is China, the middle line is India, and the bottom line, which is right here at about 15%, is Nigeria. So we all know the China growth story. I went to China the first time in 1983 as a student. I lived there for 10 years. In 1983, there was not a single private car. Within 25 years, after growing at 7 to 9%, you had 500 people lifted out of poverty, and you were the largest market for private cars, the largest producer of private cars in the world. So I've seen firsthand what can happen when you have inclusive economic development. But China invests about 45% of its GDP a year or has invested about 45% of its GDP. Now, some argue that's a bit too high. I think it's too high. I think sometimes the Chinese waste the resources they have. They build cities that are not used. So I don't think that's a good target for Nigeria. A better target is the second line, which is India. And another one of our distinguished speakers mentioned India. I think India is a real success story on the world stage. Again, hundreds of millions of people being lifted out of poverty. They invest around 30% of their GDP each year to drive that 6-7% growth. So that's the sort of number that Nigeria needs to invest to make sure that we get that growth. But as I said, the line that you can't see at the bottom, because it's too yellow, has us at about 15%. So our challenge is the gap between investing 15% of our economy, 15% and 30%. Now what happens when you invest 15%? 15% is barely depreciation. You're just replacing the capital you use up each year. You won't grow. And let me give you an example. How many people in this room, if you're, maybe no one wants to admit it, how many people in this room have bought a new car in 2017? I don't see many hands. I'm not surprised. I was talking to one of the MDs of the auto importers who told me the number of new cars he sold in a month was such a small number I wanted to repeat it. But Nigeria has 14 million vehicles on the road. We're not bringing any new vehicles in. We're not producing many new vehicles because of the economic recession. So in fact, our stock of trucks and automobiles is actually deteriorating because we're not investing enough in that. because of that. So that's a simple example of how you need to have this investment rate of about 30% to drive economic growth. And we're well short of it. So let me relate it to a couple of other economic numbers here. And again, we chose the wrong color for sub-Saharan Africa. So let me just talk through this for a minute. The left-hand side shows growth rates in Asia, Latin America, sub-Saharan Africa. And in the last couple of years, sub-Saharan Africa has dipped, sadly. But on the right-hand side, we show it disaggregated out between different countries. And you can see there's a bar that goes negative. That's the oil-producing countries. So Angola, Nigeria, Algeria, we've all had a very difficult time economically. There's also the yellow bar, which is quite low. But the bar that I wanted you to focus on right now is the red bar that's quite high, which is 6% a year for the last few years. Those are the sub-Saharan African countries that do not rely on commodities. And they are growing at 6% a year. And when we look at the bad numbers for sub-Saharan Africa, there are two countries that are pulling us down. One is South Africa, and one is Nigeria, the giants. So they make the average pull down. But when we look around the continent, we look at Uganda, we look at Ethiopia, we look at Cote d'Ivoire, we look at Namibia, there are countries that are doing very well, and we can do as well or better than any of these countries. We have the entrepreneurial spirit, we have the size of the market, we have the potential, and that's what we need to tap into. So there's no doubt in my mind that we can grow in an inclusive way at 6 to 8%, or better in some years, if we get the right level of investment. But in Canada, you may have heard of the tar sands, where basically oil, and you have it here, bitumen. You're starting to, the Ministry of Mines is working on a bitumen program. So in Canada, we basically have an infinite amount of oil that comes from bitumen. The total cost to produce that bitumen oil is about $60 to $70. So we cannot sustainably have $100 oil if there's a supply of 60 to 70. But we also have Iran coming on stream, Algeria with massive reserves. We have big reserves that are low cost. And I think the world is moving away from oil. In fact, I personally think that Nigeria should be prepared for the day when oil is $20. Maybe oil is going to go to zero if we get solar energy working, wind energy. But no one in this room, no one listening today should be basing any kind of forward economic thinking for this country on oil going back up. But more than that, I want this group to really recognize that Nigeria is not an oil nation. So what we have on this chart is a little bit about the price on the left. The right-hand side is the production of oil. We all know the difficulties that we've had with oil production. The last number on the red chart that you can't quite see is about 1.5 billion barrels a day. We hope it's coming back, which will obviously help us a little bit. But I want you to think about it for a minute from the perspective that let's say we produce 2.5 million barrels of oil a day. So that's the target for the federal government. If we produce 2.5 million barrels of oil a day, we would produce close to 900 million barrels a year. There's 180 million Nigerians. So that means for each Nigerian, we would produce 5 barrels of oil a day. Now, about half of the value of the oil goes to the IOC, the lifting costs, etc. So what's left over to build the Nigerian economy is 2.5 barrels of oil per person per year. Now, yesterday oil traded at $51. So it tells you that what's available is $125 per person per year. I don't need to tell you in this room, that's not a very big number. We are not an oil economy. And the faster that we recognize that every business leader, every politician, every citizen, the better off we're going to be. Okay, so let me relate some of this to the current economic situation. So the left-hand side of this chart shows the quarterly, the growth rate for each quarter. That's just so people are clear on this. When the government announces a growth rate of 2% for the quarter, it doesn't mean there was 2% growth in the quarter. It means that the annualized growth rate for that quarter was 2%. So it effectively grew 0.5%. Anyways, we all know for the last 4 quarters, the quarter ending in December 2016, we had negative growth. And in total for the 2016, we shrunk by 1.6% is the official number. Now I want you to think back to the first demographic chart we had. So we shrunk by 1.6% and our population grew by 2.8%. So effectively the income per capita in the country declined by 4.5%. Now if you take a country that had no population growth like Germany, and you had a headline that said our economy shrunk by 4.5%, you would really recognize that as an economic catastrophe. And that's what's happened in this country. And we all know personally the hardship and the increase in poverty that came about because of that economic hit. But the other implication about that is it's not good enough to come out of recession. So I've seen some very prominent commentators come out and say we're about to come out of recession. I've seen forecasts, I think IMF, that we're going to grow 0.7% this year. I think the official federal government forecast that the Minister of Finance can comment on later is maybe 2.2%. 2.2% is obviously much better than shrinking by 1.6%. But if we grow at 2.2%, we're still going backwards. We need, as I said, to get the growth at a minimum of 5% for this country. So let me relate a little bit to, because everyone knows, FX issue, foreign exchange. So what this chart shows is the collapse in the oil revenue. So at the top it shows we roughly, if you go back to the first quarter of 2014, we earned about $22 billion that quarter on our export of oil. By the last quarter of last year, in December 2016, that number had shrunk to about $7 billion. So 2/3 of the revenue that we earned from oil, our FX revenue, went away. As people in this room know, oil, unfortunately, has represented 90% of our foreign exchange earnings, which caused incredible hardship. So the bottom shows just what's happened to imports, and obviously, as we've had no dollars to be able to import, imports have collapsed as well. But it's not all bad news. This chart shows the orange and red part show that we spend about 40% of our dollars, or our FX, on just 2 things, which are importing refined petroleum and food. Refineries come on stream very shortly, within 2 or 3 years. In fact, 40% of this demand for FX is going to go away because we won't be importing food and we won't be importing refined petroleum. So even though we're really squeezed for now, I'm optimistic. We took all of it, most of it, and we either consumed it, squandered it, or diverted it. We did not invest it. So we had a windfall of probably $300 to $400 billion from the good years of oil, and we lost the opportunity to build the economy. Now, as I said, I lived 10 years in China. There's a Chinese saying that says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. There's nothing we can do about what's happened in the past few years. We can't go and get that money back and reinvest in those years. But we can do something going forward, and we have to do something going forward. And I promise you every bar on this chart is important. So if we look at this, the yellow bar are remittances. And Nigeria is one of the largest recipients of remittances. There are many Nigerians around the world, obviously love their homeland, love their family, want to invest in Nigeria. And the number we have is about $20 billion a year. And it's been stable even through the recession. And that sounds like good news. It may be good news, but we're a little bit uncertain because if we're really honest, part of what's happened is in the last 18 months, when the parallel rate and the official rate have diverged, some of these remittances are round tripping. So people have been able to obtain foreign currency at the official rate, they can round trip it at the parallel rate and make a profit. So I'm not sure about the remittances. The smaller two bars, there's the red and the dark red, are foreign portfolio investment and foreign direct investment. So I promised you a talk about foreign investment in the country. We're coming to that stage now. And if we go back to 2012, we got about $20 billion, $20 and $25 billion in direct and portfolio investment. And if you look carefully out there, in 2016, we got almost nothing. So the lines have come to that 0 point. I think in total maybe $3 billion. So we've had a collapse in direct investment and we've had a collapse in portfolio investment. Now I said earlier that we needed gross investment in a country of roughly 30% of GDP. Our internal resources give us gross investment about 15. We have a gap that we do not save enough. We cannot save enough to be able to get that investment that's required to hit the 5, 6, 7% economic growth. If we don't close the gap with foreign investment, we will grow below our population growth rate, which will mean we will continue to get poorer and poorer and poorer, and poverty will increase. So the fact that this investment has collapsed is an issue for all of us. Now let me talk a little bit about direct and portfolio investment. Let me start with portfolio investment. So portfolio investment, foreign portfolio investment, is when someone outside the country buys stocks or bonds of listed companies or Nigerian federal government securities or other. Now, some people say we don't want foreign portfolio investment because we're worried that if we get foreign portfolio investment, the minute the winds change, it'll go out the other way. I think that's, in our view, an error. Our purpose is not to create an environment where people want to go in and out. Our purpose is to create an economy where we're a sink for investment. So it comes in and people are happy with their investment, more comes in, and it stays in our economy. And yes, one of the prices of getting them to invest is they have to be able to sell when they want to. But the truth is that investors need a place to invest. And if we make our country the best place to invest, the money will stay here. Now, one tangible issue with the foreign portfolio investment is interest rates. So people, as I said, I have a mortgage of 21%. We all lament the high cost of interest rates. Because interest rates are high, the CBA ends up creating special intervention windows to try to give agri or small and medium-sized enterprises a special deal. But why are interest rates high? Our interest rates are high because we don't have enough demand for our bonds, our government bonds. Why don't we have demand for government bonds? Because no foreign buyer wants to buy our government bonds. So if foreign buyers want to buy our government bonds, interest rates, the price of the bonds would rise, and interest rates would come down. But because we don't have enough domestic savings, and the professor, I think, rightly pointed out, what's happening is, the entrepreneurial speaker, Prince Bimbo, said very clearly, the federal government is crowding out private sector investment because of the 16% interest rates, because there's no foreign capital that's coming in to help drive those interest rates down. So we need the foreign capital to bring our interest rates down. Now I promised to talk about direct investment as well. And I think that one of the things that I've observed in the country is that we talk a lot about small and medium enterprises being the backbone of the economy. And I think it's true. We have millions of small and medium enterprises, very critical. But the truth is, in our view, given the scale of Nigeria, what we need are investors that are prepared to put down billions of dollars and create large industries. So obviously, an old example is NTN. But if I have to give a more recent example, it's not just foreign investors, but domestic investors. I think Dangote represents what the country needs. Obviously with the cement business, where he was prepared to produce here, but now in the agri-producing rice, also in the refinery. He's prepared to put in billions of dollars. They could actually change the payments balance. He could change the refining petroleum balance. In fact, I think we should give a hand of applause to Mr. Dangote for having the courage to do that. But we don't need Mr. Dangote industry is not enough on its own. We need foreign players like GE, who are prepared to come in and put in billions of dollars. Olam is also a foreign player in the rice manufacturing. SAP Miller is coming in prepared to invest it. We need to make the country attractive to the big players that are prepared to invest significant amount of money. And when they do that, of course what happens is they create entire ecosystems, and as small and medium-sized enterprises emerge around them, as they did with Shell, for example, many fantastic indigenous companies on that. So we need the big anchors, and that's what we need to be attracting. So, just one question, we're not getting this investment. So why are we not getting this investment? I think that's what we need to really examine as a country, and we need to fix. This chart shows I'm sure people here have heard the term negative interest rates. So there's some countries in the world, when the government issues a bond, it pays a negative interest rate. It seems like a very strange thing. So if I go to the Swiss government and I buy a bond for 1,000 Swiss francs, when it comes time to return my money, they give me 998 Swiss francs. Isn't that amazing? What this chart just showed, a little small as all the charts here, but it shows all the bonds in different countries that are negative interest rate territory. And basically, I don't know the number today, but let me say $30 trillion. So if $30 trillion of investors' money that they're prepared to get a negative interest rate, and we need capital, and we only managed to get $1 billion of portfolio investment last year. So the point about this is, the capital is there for us. We just need to make ourselves attractive as a destination for that capital. How do we do that? I think in our view there's two fundamental issues. The first issue is ease of doing business. You may have heard the headline number that we rank 169th in the world in ease of doing business out of 190 countries. I tend to think of it more about big countries. You know, how are we doing versus the big countries? So the left-hand side of this chart shows the top 10 countries by population. We're the 7th largest by population. We're the 9th out of 10 in terms of ease of doing business. And the only country that ranks below us is Bangladesh. The right-hand side of this chart shows ease of doing business for sub-Saharan African countries, the big sub-Saharan African countries. Again, we rank 9th. Out of the sub-Saharan African countries, large sub-Saharan African countries, the only one that is a worse ranking than us is the Democratic Republic of Congo. So we need to do better. This number needs to move from 169. Again, a little small. What goes into the ease of doing business is things like, can you register property, can you register a business, how easy is it to pay your taxes. So this looks at it disaggregated, and we'll make this presentation available publicly to anyone. But the point we want to make here is it's actually constructed out of two places in this country. One is Kano, which represents 23% of the index, and the other is Lagos, which is 77%. So we need to make business better in Lagos. So let me just do a slight segue though on this. I was with someone the other day, and they said, why would you go to Lagos? And I thought it was a very strange question. I guess maybe I'd be here too long. So I said to him, I said, you know, there's 5 major poles of population in the world, which are China, Southeast Asia, India, Middle East and North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Now, the Asian pieces have their trajectory. They're probably going to be fine. Middle East has got some challenges, but you know, on balance, it's probably going to be okay. The one thing in the world that's highly uncertain is sub-Saharan Africa going to be economically successful? Now, we're the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa cannot be successful unless we're successful in Nigeria. And Lagos is 35 to 40% of the economy of Nigeria. Nigeria can't be successful unless Lagos is successful. So I'm living in the center of the world in Lagos, the most important place to make the planet successful. I don't know where he's living, somewhere that doesn't really matter. But I really believe Lagos is the most important city of the world. And you know, we are huge fans of Governor Modi and all the efforts to drive Lagos forward. But Lagos has to improve on this ease of doing business to get our investment up. Okay, so I've only got a few minutes left. So a couple of other points I want to make that are critical here is, again, you can't see it, but this just represents some basic budget assumptions for the economic recovery growth plan, and we'll have the Honorable Finance Minister here shortly. The important thing is Nigeria has 100 trillion Naira economy. That's our GDP, okay? 100 trillion, so keep that number in mind. Now, I just said we need 30% of GDP in order to hit our growth targets with this investment. So we need to be investing every year 30 trillion Naira. And we also said that we only have 15 trillion Naira domestically, so we needed to attract the 15 trillion Naira, which is about 40 to 50 billion US dollars. That's the scale of direct and portfolio investment we need to attract on that. So just keep that in mind for a moment. And again, too small, but this shows the government expenditures at the federal level. The total expenditure of the government this year is 7 trillion Naira. 2 trillion Naira goes to capital expenditures. So I want you to compare, we need 30 trillion Naira. We only have 15 domestically. Of the domestic Naira, only 2 trillion is coming from the federal government. It's very critical that we recognize that the fiscal stimulus from the federal government is not big enough to move Nigeria. We need over 90% of the investment required in this country has to come from the private sector. So those people that are waiting for the budget to be passed, who think there's going to be a large fiscal stimulus, they are going to be disappointed because the federal government does not have enough resources to invest enough to move the needle. And as the ERGP rightly says, the federal government is a catalyst, but we have to attract the private, domestic, and foreign investment. Now, one question that you ask is, you're worried about the debt, etc. on that. We're actually in good shape around the debt. We only have, in total, this looks over the last few years, on the left-hand side, sorry, the orange, the little circle one is our indebtedness, much lower than many other countries. So we're in a good position that way. But we spend about 30% of our federal government tax receipts on interest. So how is it possible if we have such low debt that we spend 30% on interest? Well, the reason is because interest rates are high. As I said, that's a consequence of not attracting enough investors. But the second reason is Nigeria is doing very, very, very poorly on tax collection. So what this chart shows is tax collection in the orange from oil, the yellow from non-oil. And even in our best year, we only collected 8% of GDP in tax. So PwC pays its tax, ExxonMobil's paying its tax, MTN paid extra tax, I guess. Diageo's paying their tax, U-Liver's paying their tax, Orlando, the big indigenous Dangote is paying their tax. There's a lot of people who are not paying their tax in this country. on that. So one message as part of all this, and it fits into ease of doing business, is we need to pay our tax. And if we're going to have the kind of society with inclusive growth that we want, we all need to be paying more tax. Embarrassment. According to the numbers that we have, in 2015, I believe, only 994 people in Nigeria pay more than 10 million naira in personal income tax. Now, you might say that's a large number, they earn 50 million naira, but I mean, there are a lot of people, there are more than 994 people that earn 50 million naira. Of the 994 taxpayers that paid more than 10 million in tax, 992 were in Lagos. 2 were in Ogun State. There were none in Abuja. Now, last time I went to Abuja, there were a lot of very large houses there. And so, but I think that the message is clear, is that we need to improve our tax collection as well. So I'm coming out of time, just to summarize the messages that we're trying to make, that we're trying to bring today is, we need to grow minimum 5% a year. If we're not, we're going backwards. And we cannot afford, from a social viewpoint, for the country to get poorer and poorer. To grow at over 5%, we need to invest about 30% of our GDP. But we only have about 15% available domestically. Now, there's lots of capital out in the world earning very poor returns. If they got a return in Nigeria, they would flood to our country. Well, why are we not getting our share of capital? We're not getting it because we're still a difficult place to do business. And in fact, I mentioned the 169. When I arrived, the country was 121st, so we've actually gone backwards in that. So I like those messages. I like every one in this room, everyone listening, every leader in the country, whether in business, in the church, in the mosque, in the government, to make sure that we all work together to make this a place where big investors and small investors can come and create the wealth, the prosperity, and the jobs that we need in this country. Thank you very much.